If you read anything in Spanish, you are very likely to come across the word se, likely multiple times. Se is one of the most commonly used words in Spanish, and one of the reasons for that is that it can actually be used in multiple different ways. Let's talk about two of them in this video. What's up, language leaders? Welcome back to another video. My name is Erica, here to help you love, learn, and live the Spanish language. If you're new here, well, consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell so that you don't miss any future videos. So as mentioned, we're going to be talking about the verb se. This video has actually been requested by John, who wrote, Erica, could you do a video on when and why we use se, and when and where in the sentence to throw in a lo, le, or los? Stay tuned for a future video about that one. Example, why not cómo te dices instead of cómo se dice? Okay, so I just wanted to know why we say cómo se dice instead of cómo te dices if we're talking about how do you say, right? Okay, so very good question. Stay tuned until the end of the video so that we can discuss that example specifically. So rather than bombarding you with all of the uses of se, I thought it would be a good idea to do a little mini series so that you guys can actually absorb the information and practice with me a little bit right here in the video. So today we'll talk about two uses only. And just a warning right up front, we are going to be discussing the pronoun se, and this is written with no accent mark. So we're not talking about, for example, yo sé, I know. That se is written with an accent mark. It's from saber, it's a verb, totally different thing. We're talking about the pronoun se in this mini series, okay? Use number one, the passive use of se. What do we mean by a passive voice? Well, in English, we often talk about what is happening or what has happened without specifically specifying who or what did that thing. That's the passive voice. So we can use se to create sentences that, when said in English, are said with a passive voice instead of an active voice. So let's just understand this concept a bit in English first. Santiago grows corn in Mexico. Passive voice, corn is grown in Mexico. Active voice, the little girl ate the ice cream. Passive voice, the ice cream was eaten. Active voice, the man stole the car. Passive voice, the car was stolen. So do you see that difference? Now let's take a look at those same sentences and let's see how we may choose to translate them into Spanish and how se can help us when we're working with the sentence in the passive voice. So first, Santiago grows corn in Mexico. Santiago cultiva maíz en México. How do we make this passive? By using se. We don't have to change the sentence much. Notice, se cultiva maíz en México. We put the se before the verb. We no longer talked about the person who did the action, and everything else stayed the same. The little girl ate the ice cream. La niña comió el helado. The ice cream was eaten. Se comió el helado. The man stole the car. El hombre robó el carro. The car was stolen. Se robó el carro. Did you see how that works? Not too hard, right? Let's practice. I'll say a sentence in Spanish. In case you're not familiar with the words, you will see the English translation over to the side, and then I'll simply ask you to modify the sentence. Make it passive by using the word se. Ready? Cecilia abre la puerta. Now say, the door opens. Se abre la puerta. Los niños abrieron las puertas. Now say, the doors were opened. Se abrieron las puertas. Los trabajadores venden 10 carros por día. Now say 10 cars are sold per day. Se venden 10 carros por día. Los trabajadores vendieron 10 carros el martes. Say 10 cars were sold on Tuesday. Se vendieron 10 carros el martes. Las tiendas no aceptan devoluciones. Now say, returns are not accepted. No se aceptan devoluciones. Marta vende su casa. Say, the house is for sale. Se vende la casa. Marta vendió su casa. Now say, the house was sold. Se vendió la casa. How'd you do? Good job, guys. This is why, if you drive around, depending on where you live here in Mexico like I do, or another Latin American country, or even in the US, I would see a lot of signs in Spanish that would say, se vende, se renta, se prohíbe. Okay, so for sale, for rent, this is prohibited. And then after the se prohíbe, they'll put whatever it is that is prohibited. So this is all in the passive voice. We're not saying such and such person prohibits this action. It's just something in general that is prohibited. It is for sale. It is for rent. Okay? You may have noticed that after the se, we have the verb, and this verb is going to be in the third person, either singular or plural, just depending on what we were describing. So a very similar thing applies to the next use of se that we're going to discuss, except we'll almost always be using the third person singular. So the second use of se is the impersonal use. It's very much tied into the passive use. What do we mean by impersonal? Well, for example, if I tell you, you can find the freshest vegetables in the market. Even though I said you, am I specifically saying that only you, person who I'm speaking to, can find the freshest vegetables in the market? Well, no, I'm speaking in a very general sense, basically saying a person or one can find the freshest vegetables in the market. Even though in English we tend to say you for sentences like that, whenever you can substitute that you for one or a person in general, then we can often use se in the translation. So in the example that I just gave, you can find the freshest vegetables in the market. Se puede encontrar las verduras más frescas en el mercado. Se puede. Basically saying one can find. So let's practice. I'll ask you a question, and if you know the translation right away, by all means, go ahead and say it. Speak it out loud, fill in these blanks. It doesn't matter if you're by yourself. This is how you can practice your Spanish. But if you're not sure of the words that you need, I will give you a hint by giving you the infinitive of the verb that you would need to fill in the blank. And if you're still not sure, I'll give you another hint, which will specifically tell you the conjugation of the verb that you will need. Remember, we're going to be looking for the third person singular. And of course, you will need to use se. Ready? Let's go. Fill in the blank. How does one learn to write? Cómo, blank, a escribir. Hint number one, we're looking for the verb aprender, to learn. And hint number two, we specifically need aprende. How does one learn to write? ¿Cómo se aprende a escribir. How do you feel when you're in love? Or how does it feel to be in love? ¿Cómo, blank, estar enamorado? Hint number 1, we're looking for the verb sentir, to feel. And hint number 2, the conjugation that we need is siente. This is a stem changing verb, so it does change quite a bit. Siente. How do you feel when you're in love? ¿Cómo se siente estar enamorado? You must use a seatbelt. Blank. Usar un cinturón de seguridad. Hint number 1, we're looking for deber, to have to, must do something. Hint number 2, we specifically need debe. Debe. You must use a seatbelt. Se debe usar un cinturón de seguridad. That's what they believe around here. Eso es lo que, blank, por aquí. Hint number 1, we need creer, to believe. Hint number 2, we specifically need cree. That's what they believe around here. Eso es lo que se cree por aquí. Awesome. Now, just like with the you, in English we'll often say they, not really knowing who we're talking about, just referring to they in general. That's what they say, right? That's what they believe. That's another example of when this impersonal use of the se can come into play. The last one I'm sure you're familiar with, even if you've never thought of it this way, so there will be no hints. Translate. Translate this entire sentence. How do you say window in Spanish? ¿Cómo? Blank. Window en español. ¿Cómo se dice window en español? How many times do we say ¿cómo se dice? ¿Cómo se dice? Wanting to know how you say something in Spanish. But just like in the examples that we've given previously, we're not actually asking the specific person, how do you specifically say this word? What we're really saying is, how is this said? How does one say this? So that's why we're using this impersonal se, and that's why the verb that comes after that, dice, is in the third person. Not in that second person as if I were speaking to you, like dices. ¿Cómo lo dices tú? We could say if we specifically want to know, how do you say this word? But in general, we are saying, ¿cómo se dice? How is this word said? I hope that makes sense. All right, guys, so in this video, we've learned about the passive and the impersonal uses of the word se. Like I said, we'll continue this conversation in future videos. But in order to truly internalize this and other grammar points to the point where you can use them without thinking on autopilot, remember that constant exposure to the language is necessary, and of course, a lot of practice. So what if you had a way where you could expose yourself to a specific grammar point, perhaps the one that's giving you trouble, in a natural and in a fun context? How about a story? You guys know that story is one of my favorite ways to learn language. And then what if from there you were presented with ways to practice specifically based on this fun and immersive story that you've just enjoyed? Well, I am very excited to let you know that we're working on something to help you do just that. And if you want to be the first to know all of the juicy details, then drop your name and your email on the waiting list. I will link to this below. Thanks, guys. Thanks for being with me. And until next time, don't forget to go out and live your new language today. Hasta la próxima.